last problem given to us with the reporters, which is CP2-2. So it's actually a case. It's for job order decision making and rate deficiencies. Let's go to our requirement for this problem, which is to analyze the two job cost sheets and identify where the unit costs have changed for the backhoe buckets by completing this table, and to interpret what has happened in light of the analysis and the interviews. So let's read the problem. Reeve Company makes attachments such as backhoes and grader and bulldozer blades for construction equipment. The company uses a job order cost system. Management is concerned about cost performance and evaluates the job cost sheets to learn more about the cost effectiveness of the operations. To facilitate a comparison, the cost sheet for job 206 with 50 backhoe buckets completed in October was compared with job 228, which was for 75 backhoe buckets completed in December. The two job cost sheets are as follows. Job 206 with unit cost amounting to $4,233.6, and for our 75 backhoe buckets, job 228, the unit cost amounted to $5,027.20. Management is concerned with the increase in unit costs over the months from October to December. To understand what has occurred, management interviewed the purchasing manager and quality manager. According to the purchasing manager, prices have been holding steady for our raw materials during the first half of the year. I found a new supplier for our bought steel that was willing to offer a better price than we received in the past. I saw these lower steel prices and jumped at them, knowing that a reduction in steel prices would have a very favorable impact on our costs. For the quality manager, something happened around mid-year. All of a sudden, we were experiencing problems with respect to the quality of our steel. As a result, we've been having all sorts of problems on the shop floor in our foundry and welding operations. So with this, we actually now have a clue that the problem might be because of the new substitute steel that was purchased by our purchasing manager. To confirm our theory, let's complete this table and identify the factors which cost for the increase in the unit cost. Now, we have provided this table here to identify the unit differences for steel, for foundry labor, for welding, for the steel components, shipping labor, steel factory overhead applied. So, in order to really identify the factors, the individual factors, we decided to add more items on our table. For our steel, first we calculated the unit quantity per unit on the tons level. So here, so as you can see, there were 105 tons used for the 50 backhoes. So 105 divided by 50, that should give us 2.1 per unit. And for our 75 backhoe bucket, this gave us 2.6 per unit, which was obtained by dividing the total tons used by the number of backhoes attached. So with that, we can see that there was an increase of 0.5. Now, for our foundry labor, the same is done. So there was 400 hours spent for the 50 backhoes, while there were 750 hours spent for the 75 backhoes, which gave us an increase of 2 hours per unit. And for our welding labor, the same is done. This gave us an increase of 3 hours per unit. And for our steel components, no changes were noticed. For our shipping labor, an increase of 1.4 was observed. For steel, a while ago we used tons, now we are using dollars to actually give us a clear picture on what changes on a per dollar basis happened. So an increase of $340 was observed. And for our factory overhead applied, an increase of $302.4 was observed. Now, for our analysis on a general level, if you can recall, the per unit cost for the 75 backhoe bucket amounted to $5,027.20. Well, for the 50 backhoe bucket, it only cost $4,233.60. So an increase in per unit cost amounting to $793.60 was observed. Now, to know which items actually contributed to this increase, let's go to our analysis on this table. So first on our steel, the price per ton may have been $100 cheaper, but looking at item A above, as you can see, a 0.5 ton per unit increase was observed. And here on our item F, due to this increase, an increase of per unit cost amounting to $340 was observed. For our steel components, no changes or no effect was observed. And for our foundry labor, foundry welding and chipping labor, if you notice here, in the rates, no changes were observed. So the change in our per unit cost actually was driven by the increase in the hours spent on these particular cost drivers. So for our foundry labor, an increase of 2 hours per item or per unit was observed. So multiplied by our per hour rate. So that should give us a $45 increase per unit. For our welding labor, an increase of 3 hours per unit spent was observed, multiplied by our rate of $27 per hour. This should give us a per unit increase of $81. And for our shipping, a 1.4 hours increase was observed, multiplied by the $18 per hour rate. This should give us a $25.20 increase per unit. For our factory overhead applied, we should remember that as per the problem, this is applied at 200% of our direct total labor costs. So this indicates that whatever increase was observed for our foundry, welding, and shipping, twice of the total of this amount should be the increase in our factory overhead applied, as shown in this table. So $45 for foundry, $81 for welding, and $25.2 for shipping. So twice of that amounts to $302.40. So if you add everything that we have observed, which caused an increase in the per unit cost totaling $793.60, this actually equates to the amount that we have observed here. Given this analysis and given the interview answers given to us by our purchasing manager and our quality manager, we can conclude these statements. So the issue of the matter can be traced to the change of the steel used. Though the purchasing manager wanted to reduce cost by procuring a much cheaper product, his decision actually resulted in an increase in the per unit cost of steel used, which can be seen here. So his lapse on this was not checking on the quality of the substitute steel. This is further supported by the claim of the quality manager. This is due to the inferior quality of the steel. Production was affected as more steel were used, an increase of 0.50 tons per unit, and labor for foundry and welding increased by 2 hours and 3 hours respectively. It should also be noted that the labor spent for shipping also increased by 1.4 hours per unit, though not mentioned in the interviews conducted, and might have been caused by the increase of steel used per unit. More steel means more transportation or shipping. Finally, as a consequence of the increase in labor costs, foundry, welding, and shipping, the factory overhead applied also increased. Based on the circumstances presented, the management should instruct the purchasing manager to revert back to their original supplier so as to avoid this to happen again. So with that, the case assigned to the reporters is done, and that's the end of our report. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully that you have learned something, and for your queries on this matter, please post your questions on the forum for this chapter. Thank you again, and may your learning be fruitful.